Hello, everybody. I am Erica Lukes, and I'm happy to be here on a very smoky Friday evening in Salt Lake City. And of course, things have been heating up in the world of UFOs in the community. There are lots of games at hand, particularly with TTSA, Lou Elizondo. We've had a lot of interesting feedback since our three-part series about new allegations with regard to the Travis Walton case. Right now, Travis is just finishing up an interview that he did, and I will be posting a link for that later, where for the first time he talks about an abduction that took place that we mentioned on the show last week on a freeway in LA. And so more is coming out, and it'll be interesting to see what really shakes out at the end of this. There are some people who believe, and I've been approached by actually quite a few people telling me that there is a definite takedown of people who have been abducted, and that the government is doing their part to discredit and marginalize these cases. Is that the case, or is it simply that people are actually coming forward with new evidence and looking at facts and potentially supposing or exposing people who are actually just making money off of a decades-old story? This is going to be the big hot debate for a long time, and I'm definitely, it's interesting. It's been fun. I want to thank everybody out there for getting in to UFO Classified. Scott isn't here this week, and I'll miss him, but Mario is here behind the scenes. I want to thank all of the people who support my show and donate to the show. As you know, it costs just to do the show, to archive especially, and I am going to be putting out a link to a GoFundMe to help with the archiving process. I need a lot more for this. I will say, to my knowledge, I am probably one of the only women in the world who is actually archiving, and I think that is good, because it's nice to not have the good old boys club with a stranglehold on information. And you can bet that I will definitely continue the work of some of the people who have persevered for decades without a lot of gratitude. Right now, as you know, because I say this on every show, there is a big push to erase UFO history, good or bad. But if we have a new generation of people who are coming into this and they don't have a good understanding of what others have done before, the games the government has played, the games that certain contractors have played to manipulate our thought process and to insert narratives that are absolute garbage, if we don't get that information out, then you can be sure that it will be rewritten, and trust me, they're trying. I also want to just go on the record tonight to state that, and it's going to be just a short statement, that I am no longer in any way affiliated with Chris Marks, and I do not endorse some of the comments that he put forward on UFO Classified. Those will be issues that if I choose, when legal things are wrapped up, that I may choose to comment on or not, but I want to put that out there so you know. So on that note, I'm going to add Chris O'Brien to the stream. I am here with someone that I've known for quite some time, and I have a lot of fun with Chris. I've spent a lot of hours on the phone with him over the years, and I appreciate his thoughtfulness and his willingness to teach me from some of his really incredible life experiences. Chris had experiences when he was a young child. He was very gifted as a child, and also had one hypnotic regression when he was 13, I think, if I'm correct, and I will get more into that as we progress in the show. Chris O'Brien has been investigating a paranormal hotspot in south central Colorado, north central New Mexico. He has written several books, The Mysterious Valley. In fact, I've got, and Stalking the Tricksters right here, one of my favorite books. And I mean, Chris, I'm just going to bring you in because your bio is so long. But I mean, it's like you're a musician, you've done all of these studies and all of these things. And so just, I mean, take us back to square one.
Well, yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's
It's
nice
good
to
to be
have you.
back, Erica. It's always good to know that you're ruffling feathers and taking names and breaking stories. This whole recent Travis circus has been eye opening, to say the
Yes.
least. And I think your possible explanation of the government trying to marginalize and disenfranchise some of the better cases that we do have. I think that's a point that people should really think about. If they're getting ahead of the UAP issue and trying to steer the narrative, they are not going to touch abductions because, quite frankly, as some evidence would suggest, they've been up to emulating the abduction phenomenon for whatever reasons for decades. And Jacques Vallée mentions in his Forbidden Science book that the U.S. government was staging abductions in South America in the 50s and 60s, so and into the 70s. So, I think it's important, as you pointed out, that people do not take the internet as your only source of information and research. You need to do it the old-fashioned way, like I did, and that is read books and then read more books. Choose your sources wisely,
Right.
choose your authors wisely, but you can't, you just have to automatically assume that if it's on the net and it's not from an established source, that it's from one of these ridiculous hoaxer sites for videos and photographs. 98% of what's out there is questionable. And so it's a wheat, getting the wheat from the chaff sort of scenario.
And
So,
how has
now
that worked for you over the years? I mean, because yeah, I mean,
I was so fortunate. I immediately was taken in by Linda Howe, Tom Adams, David Perkins, Peter Jordan, Lou Lou Girodo, who was the sheriff of Los Animas County, the head of the sociology department at Adams State University, um, several Native American elders. I've just been really fortunate to meet the right kinds of people that can steer me in the right direction and put, you know, um, blinders on me so that I'm not swayed by marginal information that doesn't that just confuses whatever issue it is. So I've just been very fortunate in that way.
and so many of you over the years, because you cannot have been in this for so long and not have had people that are approaching you and trying to give you misinformation or just trying to, push you out of the way because they want their face to be in the spotlight. And I think, you know,
Well,
because
I've been really fortunate that way. I don't, because I was so isolated in the San Luis Valley. I was contacted by known operatives, but I already had the heads up on them, and so I've only been hoaxed a couple times, and that's pretty good for 30 years. So
well, I'll tell you, it's certainly interesting when you do get hoaxed, and then hopefully you've got enough common sense to step back and see what's going on and eventually expose that too.
well, I debunked both cases, and fessed up to it. Fessed up that they took me for a ride, and I was too eager to believe, and it was a real big lesson for me.
Yeah, no, that it absolutely would be a good lesson. I just want to thank the people in chat and in super chat, Matthew and Jeff, for donating to the show. That's really awesome and great comments. I appreciate all of the positive feedback, and every once in a while, especially as of late, I've had a couple special trolls that have commented. But we know who you are behind your little pseudonyms, don't we? Anyway, so let's talk about when you first you had experience as a child, and you were much like myself in and of the fact that you picked up books and you wanted to read, and then you had an experience where your mother actually took you to have hypnotic regression session. Right. Can you talk a little bit about that, because I found that interesting.
The incident that you're referring to happened when I was about to turn 7 in the spring of 65, or let me see, it would have been 63, I think. And I had been adopted by the O'Briens. I'd been there for about 2 years at that point. And I was in the basement. My room was downstairs. We had a split level house that was 3 levels, and the basement level was just below ground. If I stood on my bed, my chin on the windowsill would be at ground level. And one night in the spring, I woke up because there was something caused me to wake up. I'm not sure why, but the first thing I saw were 3 about 2 foot long, I called them spheres for lack of a better word, but they were like glowing neon tubes with different colored sparkles going up and down inside of it. And I could see that they were being held by these humanoid creatures that were about the same height as me. And I think there may have been one in the back that was kind of, I couldn't see it because it wasn't lit by these light spears, and they were incredibly skinny. I mean, impossibly skinny. Like their arms are like the width of my thumb. You know how if you took my thumb and extended it into an arm, that's what their arms looked like, and their legs were very skinny as well. And without going into a lot of details, I was not paralyzed. I, kind of immediately put the covers over my head.
That is always the choice that I would make too.
Well, I pinched myself and I thought, okay, I must have been dreaming. And I pulled the covers down, and instead of them being kind of to the left of the foot of the bed, they were right directly at the foot of the bed. And I dashed out of my room, hit the corner, turned the other corner, and went up the 10 stairs to the landing at the front door, and was going to turn the corner and go up the other 4 stairs to my parents' wing of the house. And it was either the same group or it was a different group that was standing at the top of the stairs. And there was more ambient light, and so I got a much better look at him, and I was terrified. To be honest, this is probably the most intense experience of my childhood and growing up. That and breaking bones and getting teeth knocked out and bad bike wrecks. You tend to remember the traumatic things,
right?
And good Christmas presents.
Yeah, well, I do remember a couple of those. Except I will say that I never got a rubber ducky, and it would have taken 60 cents. And I'll blame my grandmother for that, but that's okay. But so you have this experience, and
yeah.
Did you? What happened with your family after you had that experience?
Well, my sister ended up finding me about 5 houses away from where I last remember being. I tried to go to the neighbors and bang on their door to get them to let me use the phone because my way had been blocked to go to my parents' end of the house. And so I just wanted to get away from them. And so I went next door, and nobody answered the door. It's about 3 a.m. And so I went to the next neighbors, and that's the last place I remember. Evidently, they saw me out there. The porch light came on, and I don't remember anything until I saw my 18-year-old sister running down the driveway to save me. And she had this kind of diaphanous robe, and she looked like an angel kind of flowing down the driveway, and I felt that an angel was coming to save me. Oh. And so anyway, I wouldn't go back to my room for obvious reasons. I was just terrified, and so she says, well, you can sleep here with me, and I'll keep you safe. And she said that years later, she told me that I was asleep, and I tried to nurse her, which I think is a pretty good indication of how how primal the terror was. And I quizzed her years later, in about, I think, 98, and she remembered the incident pretty well, and she estimated that it took her about 20 minutes to find me. I think I was actually kind of missing for longer than that, but that's what her recollection was. And then when I was 13, you mentioned the hypnotic sort of session that was done on me. A kid named Bob Berkland was my real good friend, and we went to school together for years, and we were both on the same sports teams and stuff. And Bob's dad, Buzzy, was the chief orthopedic for the U.S. ski team for the Olympics. And then his dad, Dr. Ivar Berkland, was the first licensed and I guess officially approved hypnotherapist in the country. He's pretty famous, actually.
Wow.
You can find mentions of him. And so she took me to Ivar, and she was and for behavior issues and hyperactivity and stuff to calm me down. There was no mention of the event that happened. They just said I was sleepwalking, and you must have had a nightmare. They laughed at me.
Right.
Yeah, my brother, he believed me, definitely. But so anyway, none of that was mentioned, because this is 6 years later. So I went to the regression session. His office was in the famous Smith Tower, the pointed, it used to be the tallest building west of the Mississippi. And I remember flying paper airplanes out the office window. Anyway, he laid me down on the couch and had one of them hypnotic, spinning things, that has the swirl in the middle. And he put me out. I guess I was pretty easy to hypnotize. And when I came out of it, my mother was in the room, and she seemed really freaked out. And on the way home, she wouldn't tell me why. She just said, "Well, I don't know if we're going to do that again." And she seemed upset and actually a little angry. And we had a reel-to-reel tape player, and she had asked to have a copy of the recording that was made, and but I never saw it. I asked her about it, and she said, "No, don't worry about it." She just she wouldn't address the issue. And I think what may have happened is she may have had Dr. Berkland regress me back to find out more about my original family and my life, my first 5 years of life. And maybe inadvertently something came out. I don't know. She would never, ever, all the way till a year before she died, she would not. She says, I just won't talk about it. So I never did find out. And my dad, he just said, I don't remember that. I don't remember you even going. Which I didn't believe. But so anyway, it's just one of those weird things. And because of my other missing time episodes and other pretty interesting events that I've experienced, a number of people have said that I should get a regression and do some work on that. And I thought, it's Pandora's box. You better leave the lid down. I don't want to know.
Well, and I mean, and would you go to somebody in the field?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
And why wouldn't you go?
No, I would go to somebody, number one, that was agnostic about the paranormal, UFOs. It didn't have an interest in it. That was pretty what would be the word? Just kind of a skeptical scientist type. That's
Wow. Good for
That's where I'd
you.
go. Well, I wouldn't go to,
That's a miracle.
Bud Hopkins or Barbara Lamb or, some of these wonderful people. I love Barbara and, Leo Sprinkle. I mean, he was a real helpful part of my early investigative career. He was very, very magnanimous and sent me all sorts of research material. And, but I don't know. I've never had the desire to find out anything. I've come through relatively unscathed, I think, from all the experiences that I've had, both my personal experiences prior to becoming an investigator, and then of course, some of the wild things that I've experienced in the last 30 years. Included some of the most haunted sites in America, shooting documentaries and, having hundreds of people call and report everything from, reptoid aliens that got into a ship that there was no way that all of them could have fit in this tiny ship. And then when the ship went in the air, it turned into a cloud that was the shape of a wolf's head. And then I think it turned into some other animal head shape. I mean, wild stories.
Was this at a conference?
No. This is a fireman.
That was another fantabulous tale of abduction.
Yeah. Well, this guy was a missing hunter, and he was like, I think, a captain in or a lieutenant in the Colorado Springs Fire Department, and he disappeared. Nobody knew what happened to him. And when they found him, he was babbling this incredible story. And of course, the first thing when I heard it, I thought, Jesus, we have any psychedelic mushrooms around this part of the world? And then I was told, no, it's too dry. And so we had to kind of accept his story at face value. He took us to where he said that they had built a fire and they had him, sort of restrained so he couldn't go anywhere. And he was able to catch some bugs and eat some bugs because he was really super hungry. Right. And these reptoids, they were in military fatigues. It's just a weird ass story.
Maybe somebody was dosing something. Maybe a little something.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. When they found him, he was naked, and he said that the aliens had taken his clothes and burnt them. And sure enough, they found evidence of his clothes that had been burnt in this fire. So.
If that could be the case. You'd want to, interesting.
Well, he quit the fire department and moved, and I kind of lost track of him. Or I think David Perkins was the lead guy on that, and I remember he told me that the guy at some point nobody knew where he went. But
so in what year was that? Do you remember?
I think 98.
98. And where was he specifically?
On Greenhorn Peak.
And how close is the nearest military installation?
It's right in the middle of the La Vida military operations area, which is our largest low-level flight training area.
Okay, well, interesting.
Where I had my second bona fide sighting was right within eyesight of there, and broad daylight, 150 feet away, 50 feet off the ground, zipped right in front of our car. I wasn't driving, so I got a chance to really check it out as it scooted across the valley. It looked like somebody reeling in a fishing lure really fast, kind of skipping. It was very weird.
How interesting. It's funny because over the years I've had people submit reports from Dugway, people who have been stationed at Dugway and different things. And one in particular, one case, there was a wonderful man who was out there, and this was probably maybe 4 years after the Dugway sheep incident that John Fuller wrote about. I want to talk about him a little bit later because I know that
Skull Valley.
And the Dugway sheep incident was back in 1968, and very interesting story there. But he was there, and he recalls being kind of woken up in the middle of the night and seeing this orb with multiple levels where there were these insectoid kind of beings moving about and things. And I still have a drawing from him to this day. And so some of the sightings, the reports that come out from that area are definitely interesting, or from areas where you have the military kind of intersecting with the population.
Right, and you'll find that any hotspot area will have that nearby proximity of military government presence.
Right. And so let me just, because I'm really interested. You have these experiences as a child, and then you move into, your teenage years and things, and it sounds like you were a bit of a rebel.
They should have skipped me several grades. I knew everything before the class even started. I would read ahead, and then I'd do some research and argue with the teacher and say, well, yeah, but how about this? How about that?
I can see that in you. I can believe it. Huh.
Especially the Jesuits had me in ninth grade, and oh man, I'm probably one of the only people that survived being, dismissed with prejudice. Oh, Brian, you're out of here. and they didn't kill me, they put me in front of the Grand Inquisitor.
Oh, that's...
But yeah, I would argue with my philosophy teacher, Father Hess, and educate the class about the first and second councils of Nicaea, and how the Jesus slain, Jesus risen myth was just the latest of about a dozen stories older than the Hebrew.
Oh, way to win friends and influence people.
Oh,
hello, man. Dale Carnegie should have used you as an example of what not to do.
Oh, man. I got in so much trouble. But and I got my principal fired in high school because he posted a fake school board regulation about smoking in the lavatories. That he made up a number and made it sound all official. All I had to do, I was editor of my little school newspaper, and all I had to do is go down to the school district and look up the regs, and there wasn't one.
Oh,
and so
dear!
He'd been educator of the year in the state the year before.
Oh no!
And
dear!
And then he's an I don't know how many degree black belt in karate and judo, and the kids and the parents had a big boycott of the school, and they were picketing outside.
Nuts!
Wow! He got in the one kid's face who was kind of leading the charge. I just chaos and pandemonium. My work here is done. I just kind of pulled back after that, but he got into an altercation with the kid, and the kid looked like he was going to shove him, and he took him and flipped him on the ground on the concrete, and he was fired immediately. A day later, he was gone.
Whoa, mama. When you look at, and I want to just kind of like that incident compared to like what's happening with Travis Walton, because I've gotten a lot of blowback from people who are saying I'm ruining somebody's life and all of these things. And I mean, how did you ever, like with that, did you ever feel? Oh
yeah. Even to this day, when people hear the story, they go, how could you ruin the guy's career and everything? I said, well, I didn't. All I did was just, point out what I thought was the obvious. The reason why I did it was because my brother was the first one to be kicked out of school for an entire semester under that law that he posted, under that regulation. And my brother was the first one that got busted. And so that kind of ticked me off. And on my way to deliver the paper, we used to do it the old-fashioned way with a light board and rubber cement and, paste it out the old-fashioned way. I had a second, I did an editorial every issue, which is every 2 weeks. And I did some innocuous editorial, which the advisor, the teacher signed off on. And then on the way to the printer, I just substituted the innocuous editorial with the bombshell story, and
Oh, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I a lot of people. I got I got a partial scholarship to Columbia, partially as a result of that. So it wasn't all bad,
Well, yeah,
but
no,
yeah,
and
I got in trouble.
well, that is it. It is the interesting thing. It's like sometimes when you try to expose things or present factual information, it's like there's a ripple down effect, and
Yeah,
you're surprised at how many other people it affects. And I think case in
yeah,
point, like I'm saying with the latest the Travis Walton thing.
yeah. The
But
messenger ends up getting a lot of the flack.
well, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, I guess I wear those colors proudly. I don't know, something. I have security
Well,
cameras.
we're both similar in that way. We don't, there are no torpedoes. What do you mean? It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. I've been chastised and vilified for years because I speak my mind and I don't pull punches, and I'll call a spade, and there's some people in the field that I feel are absolute charlatans and hoaxers, and some they're just downright nuts, delusional.
Would you care to name names?
Well, I think a lot of them have already sunk themselves. Corey Good, this what's his name? That Smith character that says I autopsied 3,000 aliens. Yeah, right, dude.
I actually saw something the other day, and he's made a comeback. Emery Smith.
I know. Yeah, and David Wilcox, another one. I think
Lord
these guys
Fauntleroy.
yeah, and Laura Eisenhower and Andrew Basiago and Alfred Weber and Michael Sala. These people, Stephen Greer, these people believe anything that comes along that fits into their little reality paradigm.
And that's the interesting thing. I've been, watching or trying to watch, with the cocktail, some of the new UFO shows that are coming on, and I was really kind of shocked to see in a new UFO show that just came out with some of these people talking about things, and they're mentioning old cases, and the people in these cases are clearly Nazi sympathizers, and I'm thinking, really, we're going to go back to the benevolent, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, loving beings who are doing I mean, what is that about? Why do you think this is making a resurgence like that?
Well, everything in this particular field it runs in cycles. Things you have about every twice a generation. These things circle back around, and my response to people, oh, you're the guy that believes in aliens, and I say, well, yeah, obviously there's going to be something intelligent out there in the cosmos somewhere, but if you think you're important enough for them to come and abduct your ass, you're wrong. I just don't believe that we're dealing with something that's off planet. I think they may be more terrestrial than we are, and they're just pretending to be off planet so that we won't get freaked out to know that we've had other tenants in the building. I've always been a firm. I've had a real strong hunch and suspicion that the government may even know about some of this. In fact, I saw an article about a year and a half after Ed Snowden came out, and he had moved to Russia and stuff, and it was one of the early kind of data dumps that he did, and one thing I saw that I couldn't believe nobody picked up on it, but he said that there's a daily report that goes to the White House of monitoring deep oceanic trenches in the world's oceans for UFO activity, and that these things are based in some of the deeper trenches, and they come and go at will, and that we know about it, and there's nothing we can do. So we just want to make sure that we monitor the activity. And it went by like I don't know, fart in the breeze, it was just there one day and gone the next. And, I kind of remember thinking to myself, why doesn't anybody pick up on this? It's just too outrageous, I guess.
Interesting. And so, okay, so when you got into this in a public way, and you mentioned like Linda Moulton Howe and some of the people that you were introduced to, describe some of like the first and most memorable encounters that you had with these people.
Well, I didn't really know much about the field. I had been a closet buff back east in New York for years, and you just don't talk about this stuff in Manhattan. Maybe now you can, but back in the late 70s, all to the 80s, it was social suicide to even acknowledge the subject, let alone, communicate with people that you knew more than maybe you should about it. I've got over 1,000 books on the paranormal, psychology, cryptos, philosophy, and I've read most of them 2-3 times. So that's one thing I just can't stress enough. Read books. Just I don't care if you don't like to read. You gotta educate yourself. Read books, take notes, and I was really really gratified when I was able to talk to Linda, and she was very, very nice. She said what everybody who knew about the Valley then, Tom Adams, Gary Massey, Peter Jordan, especially David Perkins, who I consider my mentor, they all said, "Yay! Finally, somebody moved to the Valley that's willing to log the 300,000 miles in 6 years, running around and documenting some of these wild reports, because nobody was doing it, and all this stuff was happening, and word of it was not getting out past the local community." And so they were all excited. And Linda, the first thing she did on my very first phone call is gave me a crash course in how to interview people. And I've used those techniques ever since. She's one of the best at interviewing people. And she also scarfed every case that I had. I would immediately call her with all my cattle cases. And then she would go and, well, my people in the Valley are saying, she never even named me by name. But I'm a team player. I didn't care. I just wanted to get the information out there. She was the expert. I was just the gumshoe guy, taking pictures and video, and then learning how from others. Gabe Valdez, the New Mexico State Patrolman, David Perkins, on how to actually do a post-mortem forensic crime scene investigation. And so these people were really just wonderful. They took me under their wing, and they showed me the ropes. They gave me tons of do's and don'ts, and turned me on to new authors and new books. And
let me just to sidetrack you. We're talking about like doing an investigation. There is a new TV show out, and there was a cattle mutilation on the show. And describe, before we get into that a little bit, what would be the typical protocols for an investigation?
Well, the first thing I tell the rancher when I find out about it, if it's, within a timely manner, if he saw the animal alive the day before, especially during the warm months, spring through fall. If it's during the winter, the animal will stay pristine for longer because of the temperatures. But generally these things happen between last frost and first frost. So if you don't get there within 24 hours, forensically, there's really not much that you're going to be able to do. But the first thing I tell the rancher is get a light-colored tarp, preferably reflective silver, and stake the animal out with the tarp so birds can't get to it. And chances are that other animals will stay away as well. Scavengers, and don't try to keep everything away from it until I can get there, or until a local vet that I have a relationship with can get there, and then treat it like a crime scene. Walk in one path that goes in and out, and take a male dog. I used to bring my brother's Pyrenees, and he would be the first one introduced to the scene. We'd let him out of the car, and then he would immediately run around and find where the coyotes pissed, and he would pee where they peed. So I could immediately identify instantly where the coyotes came in and how close they got, because then you could find their tracks and you could backtrack them. Usually they'll only go within 50 feet. There are exceptions to that. In fact, I had a case where the cow was mutilated, and then the coyote that started eating on it, it was mutilated. That's a very unusual case. It's the only one like that I've ever heard of. But basically, it's treated like a crime scene. Look for.
And so, would that mean that you would have multiple people walking in and around the body and touching it with pencils and?
No. No.
Just wanted to clarify that.
No. Basically, what I do is I create about a 50-foot perimeter, and then chances are the animal was taken somewhere else and then dropped in a different part of the pasture. So you try to ascertain where the herd was approximately during the time that the animal was thought to be killed and disfigured. And I can't wait to someday do this, is actually find the spot where the animal was taken. And again, there are protocols covered in the field. If you're a veterinary pathologist, get them on your good side and get a budget so that you can pay, the only real expert that can come out and determine tantogenesis, the cause of death, and how the thing was disfigured. And I'm assuming most of your listeners know the definition of a cattle mutilation or livestock, unexplained livestock death, as I prefer to call them. It's an animal that's found dead for no apparent reason. It is missing, generally on the classic mute, it's missing its tongue from deep into its esophagus, and the lower mandible flesh is cut away from the jaw, and the jaw appears to be polished, which is impossible to do just scraping it with a knife or something, or it's spooky looking. It looks like it's been in the sun for a number of years. The real classic cases, oftentimes an ear's gone, the mammary glands, the udders, the genitalia, if it's a bull, the rear end oftentimes is taken out like a plug. There's no spilt blood generally. It's not always the case, but generally there's no blood. And generally the animal, there's no tracks around it. There's no footprints. There's no, except maybe the animal's own. I've had cases where the animal was 30 feet from where their tracks ended. In one case, in fact, you have a picture of the horse, the Miller horse case there. But the very first thing I do is I look for cut hair follicles. That is the only real instant giveaway that something with intelligence, armed with a sharp implement, did the actual cutting on the animal.
Okay, can you tell me which photo?
It's the photo with the horse and my finger pointing. It's the horse's head. Do you have that one? I
am thinking I do. It's black and white.
No, that's the calf.
Okay, sorry. Okay, let's go.
It's a white horse.
You with the camera. And sorry, it's not Three Amigos first case. So I don't think I actually have that one.
Okay, let me send it to you real quick.
And I don't know if
you can put that first case on there. That was a weird one. That was my very first case. I was interviewing an ex-sheriff who lost 49 head in either shot, stolen, or mutilated in 2 weeks in October 75. I was at his house doing a video interview, and his phone rang. I have this all on tape. His phone rang, and his nephew said, "Are those cattle guys there?" And he said, "Yeah." He goes, "Good. I have a fresh one for you." And so we raced over there, and this cow had been mutilated the night before I went down to interview his uncle. And it was the weirdest thing. There was a bunch of local ranchers started showing up, and there was about 8 or 9 of them, and they're all standing there kind of, going, wow, this is scratching their heads and stuff, saying, oh boy, I hope these aren't going to start again. And all the other cows were crammed over in the corner of the pasture. All of a sudden, one of them came over, and I think it was like the matriarch cow. And she started walking around it, and then she lifted her head and let out the most painfully mournful moo, like moo. And all the ranchers. At that point, my batteries had run out, unfortunately, and I wished I got the expression. All these guys looking with their mouths wide open and their eyes like bugging out. And then all the other cows, there were about 60 of them, came racing over, thundering across the pasture. And then they all started circling it sideways with their nose down towards the dead cow. And they all started going around it and the tree that was right there, pawing at the ground and duplicating the original moo. And I asked these guys, "Have you ever seen cows do this?" And they said, "No, man, we never seen nothing like this before." I mean, they were dumbfounded. And so that was my very first case. And as it turns out, we found a rare bit of on-site evidence. There was this stuff that looked like orange marmalade. It was kind of oily. It appeared to have air bubbles in it. There was about enough to cover a quarter. And so we very carefully gathered it and put it into one of my film containers. Back then, I was still shooting. We didn't have digital cameras yet. This would have been April '93, and I wrapped the whole thing up in duct tape and then signed my name on it and sent it by courier directly to hematologist Dr. John Altschuler, who's a blood expert. And he had a diagnostic lab or access to one, and I sent it to him in Denver. And they got there that day, or later on that early evening. And he said when he opened it up, he said it was all intact. And when he opened it up, he said he couldn't find any evidence that anything had been inside that container except film.
Interesting. And so, how did you get hooked up with him? How did you hear about
Linda.
him?
Yeah, Linda was the one that found him. She was looking for the mystery pathologist who did the examination of Snippy the horse in September '67, and she was able to, through some good sleuthing, was able to figure out who the mystery pathologist was, and she camped at his house to get him to talk to her. And so they finally, she wore him down, and and they became friends. And he started doing lab work for her, and subsequently doing lab work on some of my cases as well. Before he
was he connected with Bigelow at all?
No, this is before that. This is back in '93. I don't think Linda got involved with Bigelow until '98 or something. Maybe no.
Interesting.
94 or 95, I think.
Wow. And I've got some great questions here that I just want to ask you really quickly, and some just funny comments. But so one talking about cattle prions disease can transfer to humans, and then also a comment: cow ear cells are used for cloning in the industry. And I wanted to just get your thoughts on both of those comments.
Yeah, there's thousands of uses for cow parts. I mean, literally, I have a list of all the things that they use cow parts for, and it's several pages long. It's it's pretty amazing how useful they are to a lot of, for making glue and gelatin capsules and perfumes and just any number of industrial products. They use the cast off parts of the cow to to utilize that. As far as prions go, that's, if I had to pick, the most obvious reason why humans, if they're involved, why humans would potentially be testing and experimenting on cows. First of all, it tells me that it's the place that's important, not necessarily the animal. It's its location in nature, and I think that may be the smoking gun rationale. I have a strong suspicion, as does Colm Kelleher, who was the managing director for Bigelow's National Institute for Discovery Sciences, and then became the managing director of the Bass Aerospace Company. He's a microbiologist, and he wrote a book that's on Anomalous Books called Brain Trust. And he does a slam dunk examination of the correlation between mutilations and the outbreak of mad cow disease. And I suspected this for years. He actually did the legwork, and not only did he come up with that conclusion, but he came up with the conclusion that the type of mad cow disease that we're dealing with may have been manufactured at the Army Chemical Corps at Fort Detrick. And it got loose in nature in '67 in Colorado, right when the Snippy case happened. And I don't think that these things are, accidents. I think that there's some smoking gun evidence that links the government to mad cow disease, and it could be the beef industry that's behind some of these cases as well. Most of the cases happen, in fact, 99% of them happen to small ranching outfits with, 500 head of cattle or less. You never hear them happening in feedlots and that sort of thing. And that being the case, I find it interesting that the areas of highest incidence on the Front Range of Colorado and Nebraska and New Mexico, about 70 to 80% of the ranches that used to be there, the small mom and pop ranches, are all gone. And wow. I think that there's a good chance. I mentioned the Emilio Lobato, who lost 49 head in 2 weeks, shot, stolen, or mutilated. He and 2 former county sheriffs went on the record and said that the neighbor, who was this really rich, nasty piece of work rancher, was mutilating cows to get people to sell their land, and they wouldn't sell. So he would just launch on them. And unfortunately, he almost drove. It took 30 years for Emilio to rebound from, the horrific loss that he had. I mean, we're talking, I don't know, counting his seed bulls and everything, probably $100,000. Wow. So it's. Oh
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and these are things that most people don't consider. It could be used as societal manipulation. I find it interesting that the mad cow disease that broke out very near where one of the biophysical labs that was testing the mad cow disease in the 60s, that we had an outbreak in the deer in October 17th, 1997. There was a blowdown event that blew down 2 million trees on the Continental Divide. And within a week to 10 days, the deer started showing signs of mad cow disease, and it's now spread across the entire rest, east to the all the way to the East Coast. you have chronic wasting disease in the deer.
And interesting, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about Colm Kelleher. Of course, that I would want to do that. But there's a question from Steve in the chat, and he wants to know about the magnetite being a factor at many classic mutilation sites. And can you talk about more in with regard to that?
Yeah, I was involved. Just to give a little background on this, I was involved in a scientific study that biophysicist Lefty Levengood and his organization, Nancy Talbot and Joe Burke's BLT Research, they did a bovine incision site study, and they were requesting field investigators to use their protocols and gather complete soil and plant samples and forensic samples and any other evidence and send it to be part of the study. Well, one particular case that stood out from it was one that I did. I think I had a couple, three in there, but this particular one was completely documented by the BBC. So they had broadcast quality cameras watching me, do all the, well, not all, but most of the gathering of samples. You'd take plant and soil right at the animal and then go out in the 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, every 5 feet to 25 feet, and then every 10 feet to 55 feet, I think, and then a control sample a mile away, and do that in all 4 directions. It takes some doing, and then take some incision samples, and then send them all off to Michigan, where his lab was. Well, I went ahead and sent the samples there, and it's so funny. The BBC guys, I mean, they were city boys from London, and seeing the rear end of a cow blowing these huge gas bubbles out its ass, and the dog licking the eye socket of the cow. I mean, they were just, it was so funny. They were so grossed out. I had so much fun cracking jokes at their expense. They were there to lampoon me, and I ended up getting, I ended up turning the tables on them. So anyway, they found right at the body, there was, forget how much, I think 300 times, maybe 400 times the amount of magnetite around the animal as there were in the control samples, which are a mile away. And then as it went out, it just dropped off at 50 feet. But it seems like there was some sort of magnetic event, and the particles that were nearest the animal appear to have been melted in like a negative G environment. These little pieces of magnetite are from 1 to 10 microns in size, very small. It's generally thought to be meteoritic dust in a place like the Valley, which doesn't have any residual iron deposits. And to have that large of an increase is highly unusual. And then to have those small sphericals present. And even plant samples were magnetized. And he found quartz beginning to grow on some of the plants, which is also pretty amazing. And that was the case that he that really convinced him in his mind that that the cases were similar to landing site cases of UFOs, and also of real crop circles, not the hoaxed ones. So I don't know what to think. It's like there was some sort of magnetic event that was able to draw the magnetite to right around the animal. So I mean, go figure.
And so let me ask you, because when we look back at the height of the early 70s, and you have movies like Close Encounters a little bit later, and I remember a specific scene where you've got these military guys sitting around talking, oh, let's blame it on the cattle mutilations, let's blame it on this or that. And I mean, it was just so funny to me to see.
Yeah.
I mean, all of this was just like Wow. I mean, this like talk about plausible deniability. I mean, it just
Yeah,
is a very,
exactly.
very strange thing to see. And so I want to ask you, let's flash forward to Skinwalker Ranch
Uh-huh.
and, Colm Kelleher. And, obviously he was brilliant, and you mentioned brain trust. Why in the world would he get wrapped up in an area where there are alleged shape-shifting beings jumping out of vortex, a vortex?
Because he's getting really paid really well by Bigelow.
Okay.
I don't know. I think he's got I think he's got a curious mind, and he's open-minded. I like Holm. I'm not sure if he cares about me any, but I really think that he's quite courageous in attempting to get to the bottom of the mutilation question. And also his partner at NIDS, veterinary pathologist George Onett, is another guy that needs to be mentioned. He really did some good work, and you can find in the Wayback Machine and other places the complete files of the reports that it took me and a couple other people Dr. Bigelow for about 3 or 4 years before they really put up a website and started publishing papers and stuff. And I do blame myself for some of that because I
That was
just I
good.
didn't care.
And there were, I mean, and that's one of the things. I mean, you've got Colonel John Alexander on record in the early days saying that they would publicly, go forward with this information, which they ended up not doing. And my understanding is Colonel Alexander did get in a little bit of trouble for putting that forward. But then you can find, like you mentioned on the Wayback Machine, what are there, like maybe 7 reports that they have?
No, there's more than that.
Really?
Yeah, there's a number of them. There was one there from Utah with the potassium. What was it? Potassium cyanide, I think, or whatever they use for the gas chambers to kill people. They found the liquid form of that in the ocular fluid in the cow's eye, and they also found almost a complete cessation. There was no copper in the blood, which was very, very puzzling. That was a case that was investigated by Jean Bigelow, and I'm pretty sure she was the one that did the actual field work on it. But that picture of the horse that I sent should be in your inbox. And the reason why I bring that up is because the first thing any person should do is find out if an animal has had its hair cut, because when a scavenger or a bird or maggots, they work between the hair. They can't cut the hair because they're not a sharp knife. And you'll invariably, the real mutilation cases have cut hair follicles. And the picture I just sent, you see me pointing to where there was a number of places on there, but that was an obvious place where the hair was cut. And this animal was found the first week of March, and at 7,500 feet, there was snow on the ground. The animal obviously still had its winter coat. So it was very apparent that something made that cut and cut the hair.
I'm trying to get that loaded up on here, and I can't do that. So I'm bummed about that, but hopefully I can try to figure that out and get that up there in a little bit.
Okay.
And so when you work, when you got in contact with Colm Kelleher and Onett and things, I mean, who was taking this seriously? What was Colm's initial thought process for this? Was he always kind of the mindset that this was something that we were doing, and that this was testing of some sort, or was it the kind of the extraterrestrial?
I think he ended up at that conclusion because he had data and evidence to back that up. There is no data and evidence except anecdotal to back up the aliens coming from a different planet to gather genetic material for whatever purpose I tell people, if they were just after genetic material, all you'd have to do is sneak into a slaughterhouse or an abattoir and pick the lock, go in at night, and there's big vats of it. They'd have all they need. They don't need to risk discovery and go out in the fields and pastures of the world and mutilate livestock out in the back 40. It just doesn't. It didn't make sense to him, and it doesn't make sense to me. And so he started looking for correlations between outbreaks of mad cow and the book Brain Trust. I mean, it sank like a stone. I don't think it sold very many copies, but boy, I tell you, I highly recommend it.
And there's a really good interview actually that he did about the book that you can find online, which is wonderful to know.
Well,
And
I was in an adversarial position with the Bigelow folks, with the exception of Gabe Valdez, who had been hired by them when he retired from New Mexico State as a New Mexico State patrolman, and Gabe and I always stayed in fairly close touch when things were popping, and he worked for Bigelow for several years, and but I was dogging Alexander, Dr. Death, I called him, and not so much Coleman and George Onett, because they were actually doing good work, but the whole secrecy thing about Bigelow. And so finally at some point, I got a weird email from Alexander when I got implicated in the whole alleged deaths that occurred on the ranch while Nids was there. And I got in a bit of trouble for digging around on that. And
can you just elaborate a little bit on that? Because I think there's some people here that are like, "What are you talking about?" And then they could run away with things. But they're
again, this is all a provisional theory. But I've got three separate witnesses that claim, two of them think it happened in July '97. That there was just like one of these portals opened up right next to some of the guards. They freaked out, tried to fire, and then got taken out or injured badly. And two women who saw the convoy of SUVs with the whip antennas zip through town and down to the ranch. They followed them, and then it was at night, so they were able to hide in the shadows and kind of observe what was going on. And there was a flatbed truck, and there was a helicopter that came in, and finally one of the local tribal cops that were kind of on the outer perimeter saw them and came over and said, "What the hell are you guys, you're doing here? Get out of here." And they said, "Well, what happened?" They said, some Indian killed himself, is what he said. So, and then I had another source, insider source, that claimed that there was some real serious injuries that happened, possibly a death. And then I heard from somebody else that there was possibly two deaths, or one guy got really messed up and the other guy died. And it was a weird event on Charing Cross Road in London. This would have been 2003, I think, where Nick Cook was there, from Jane's Defense Weekly, and this strange woman with a bodyguard, weird looking dude, and Uri Geller was there, and a number of other people, and this woman, Jack Sarfati too.
Oh God! Well,
crazy
all of them were there.
So yeah, your typical cast of questions.
Maybe tomorrow we'll get 50 emails about all of this. That'll be good.
Yeah,
Email threads that last forever.
Be aware. Anyway, I get a call from Zach Van Eck, and he said, I just had the weirdest conversation with Jack Sarfati, and he told me that this French woman and her bodyguard were at this meeting in London that I was at, and she blurted out that there were deaths. People were killed on the Nids Ranch. And of course, this was news to Sarfati. So he immediately, when he got home, a day or two later, he called Zach Van Eck, who wrote the original article, who was the one that told me about the case and suggested I meet Terry and go up there. I was actually the first outside of the region investigator up there, to my knowledge. And so Sarfati evidently started calling around, and then Zach called David and asked him, and then David called me and said, do you know anything about this? And so I was on this little bulletin board called June. It was just about 30 of us, investigator types that would keep each other informed. This is back, fairly early on in the internet days. And I put on there a post, hey, anybody hear about deaths on the Terry Sherman Ranch in Utah? And within 20 minutes, I got this scathing email from Sarfati, how dare you? And my brand new computer crashed, had a catastrophic hard drive crash, a mechanical failure. I mean, within 20 minutes, that morning. So, oh man, I had 2 weeks of backpedaling on that. I called everybody that I knew in NIDS, John Schusler and George Knapp and all these people.
I'm sure they were helpful.
Well, it was interesting, the response I got. Whoa, I don't know about that. I never heard anything about that. It was like, why, what brings this up, And so I did some real, my Arthur Murray dance lessons came in handy. I was soft shoeing all over, boy, doing the old 2 week back, sort of damage control soft shoe dance.
But wasn't there a little bit of a snippet in one of the European UFO magazines about that, with a photo of this, mystery woman and some of these characters?
Yeah, that was several years later. I dropped it like a hot potato for obvious reasons, and because this would have been right around, I think, when was the ATEP thing? When did that go off? 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was before that. But anyway, I just I couldn't afford to lose another computer, especially a brand new one.
And so do you think that was directly related with Sarfati? And
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I took it to my computer guy, and he said, "What did you do?" And I said, "I didn't do anything. I turned it on, and it just went. It started making weird noises."
Interesting. Yes,
he'd never seen that before. You see, it's a catastrophic mechanical crash of your hard drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I had when I was Utah State Director, and I got involved in some interesting things. I had, brand new iMac, and I had the hard drive replaced 4 times in, a few month period. And the guy finally looked at me and said, "We don't want to touch this. Not going to be responsible."
Yeah.
So interesting times.
I'm lucky. Mine was under warranty, so I was able to. I was able to get it replaced, but still, the data.
No, right.
It was
right.
1 to 3 times I lost all my data.
Well, and it was interesting, too, and I hate to go, off topic, but we are talking about Utah and some of the people involved, and I know Elaine Douglas was looking into some very interesting things, and she was often. From what it sounds like, she was derailed in some of her attempts, and she was specifically looking into Bigelow.
Yeah, I remember talking to her about it a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah. And so let me go back, and I'm sorry to, my obsession with Skinwalker Ranch. Clearly, I'm not learning my lesson, or maybe I am, and I'm figuring things out. But when you were dealing with the Shermans, what happened with them? Because obviously they're not going on record. And the last time I talked to Junior Hicks, who was, just an incredible human being, he told me that Bigelow had basically gotten Mrs. Sherman fired from her job at the bank in Roosevelt. Is there anything that you know about that?
Yeah, it was just a show of force, and that I think that was one of the reasons why Terry took off and moved to Montana, was because I don't know, something happened between them. I don't know what it was. But I do know, I mean, I went up there and right as that first article was coming out, I think maybe the day before. And so it was a pristine investigative environment for me. And God, it was hot. It was like 105. And I just, I figured it was going to be the beginning of a long and fruitful relationship. And so if usually what I do when I first meet someone who's had these types of experiences happen, I'm very quiet. I ask very few questions. I scribble notes. I don't record. And I just let them volunteer information. I might ask an occasional follow-up question, but I want them to understand, to feel confident in speaking with me. And I almost daily I was on the phone with him for the next month and a half before he signed the non-disclosure agreement. But I absolutely believed him. I mean, I've interviewed thousands of people, and especially I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ranchers, and you can tell, man, when somebody is genuinely frightened for their family's safety. And he was frightened. He says, I have got to get out of here, and the only way I can do it is if I sell this place. Who would you suggest I talk to? And I said, well, there's only two people with enough money that I know of that are interested in these subjects that you're talking about, and that would be either Robert Bigelow or Lawrence Rockefeller. And I actually gave him their numbers, but Bigelow ended up calling him before Terry could call NIDS. So
which, I mean, tell us a little bit about Rockefeller's, he's always had an interest in this subject and things.
Yeah.
I mean, what are the motivations there? Is he just like Bigelow, an entrepreneur who had a personal experience as a child, or?
No. I believe it or not, and it's great. One of my favorite stories. You can believe it or not. I don't care. The Undersecretary General of the UN lived in the little town in Colorado where I did. He was Undersecretary General for the Environment for the UN, Maurice Strong, and his wife Hannah, and they lived a couple houses away from me. And one morning I got a call, and it was Hannah, and she says, drop what you're doing, get your research together, and get over here now. And she'd never, ever done anything like that before. And I thought, oh, geez. So I grabbed all my stuff and went over. And as I'm going up the stairs to the front door, the door opens and John Mack walks out with Hannah. And they're talking and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, it's John Mack. And this is back when I'd only been involved in this field for 3 or 4 years at that point. So it was a big deal to meet someone like that. And so he was leaving, and I thought, oh, man, I didn't get here in time. He had a flight, and he had to get to Denver, blah, blah, blah. And so she goes, okay, well, come on in. And I walk in. There's Lawrence Rockefeller standing there. I got to spend one-on-one with Rockefeller the entire weekend. All that day and evening, we had dinner. I went home. He told me to come back the next day if I wanted. I came back and spent the entire morning and afternoon with him. And I was just absolutely charmed. The guy was the sweetest I could imagine. And he just had a passion for the subjects, especially crop circles. He was really just blown away. I never knew this, but he had a degree in philosophy from Princeton, which I found interesting. But after hours and hours and hours of talking about the paranormal and stuff, you kind of run out of things to talk about. So I started quizzing him about, what it's like running the world and all this. And he was laughing. No, it doesn't work that way. We wouldn't even be able to get our schedules lined up and agree on where to meet, let alone what to talk about. And I said, well, I don't really believe you, but yeah, it makes sense. And then I said, there's this new thing called the internet. And, I did some research last night, kind of wanted to come up with some things to ask you about. And it seems every time your brother David came up, people think he's the Antichrist. And he started, whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't forget, the guy was, I think, 88 or 89. He was an old guy at that point. And he couldn't stop laughing. And he started turning blue and choking and coughing. And his handlers came running out.
Good.
They grabbed him.
I need some of those.
They whipped him into the house. Some doctor ended up coming, and they came out, once they got him situated, and they said, your time with Mr. Rockefeller is over. And I went home. I thought I killed him. I thought I literally did. He was really just,
I don't mean to laugh. Sorry, that's.
Well, I went home and I told Isadora, I said, honey, I think I killed the guy with a joke. And then Hannah called me up the next day, and she was furious because he left without her being able to ask him for money, because he was one of her benefactors. And so she goes, thanks a lot, and so I'm like, oh, geez, man, I blew it. And careful when you tell a billionaire a joke, And so it was a couple of days later, a telegram from Mongo on the door, and this guy with this funny hat handed me an envelope, and it was a gift from Lawrence Rockefeller.
Wow.
That with no strings attached. And he said, I figured if I gave you more than $10,000, you'd have to pay taxes on it. You could accept a $10,000 gift, and it's tax-free. And so he funded me for the rest of that year. And then as soon as January came around, he funded me for another year. So,
wow.
Then his second in command cut everybody off. I'm one of 5 people, I think, that got funded, at least from this country. Colin Andrews, Linda, Stephen Greer, myself, John Mack, and then I got $150,000. I got him to give Levengood $150,000 to buy lab equipment and stuff. So,
and so it sounds like he's much more giving with funding things than Bigelow. Bigelow sounded like he was very. Bigelow's very mercenary about it. He doesn't gift you. He buys you, and he buys your work, and he buys your results. I mean, look how he got away with getting John Carpenter's 100 some odd abduction files. Right. Let's talk about that. For people who don't know about this, this is very interesting because John Carpenter was an abduction researcher who worked for MUFON, and there was an exchange of money at the hands of Bigelow to buy Carpenter files, the Carpenter files. Can you give us a little more background on that?
Well, there's several versions of it, so I'm really not. I'm not completely sure which one to believe, but Carpenter said, "Look, I redacted it, everybody's names and stuff, so it was all anonymous and everything. But still, it's pretty unethical to do that if you're a licensed psychologist or whatever he is. I know he was a credentialed psychotherapist, I think, and therapeutic hypnotist. You have to be, it was really dumb for him to do that. Evidently, he was made an offer he couldn't refuse. Remember that movie, I think Ringo Starr's first movie with Peter Sellers and Raquel Welch, The Magic Christian, where Peter Sellers is this super rich guy, and he's going around finding out, he goes to the world's, top opera star, and says, how much would it cost for right in the middle of one of your things to do a strip tease for the audience? And so he would find out where everybody's, where that level was in money, that they would do outrageous things. And so that's what the movie's about. It's actually quite funny.
Oh, I loved that movie. In fact, I've been on a Peter Sellers kick lately. So I need to watch that again.
That and Being There is another
such
really
a great movie. He was incredible.
Yeah. But I don't know. It's to me, and then the whole thing with MUFON and Bigelow, ending up with some really important cases that he cherry picked from MUFON, and the way that whole thing went down. That would have been 2010, I think, or 2009. It's just, he's kind of snaky when it comes to grabbing what he thinks he needs, and he's really I've been told that he's trying to figure out a way, number one, to monetize exotic technology, but the other overriding, I guess, what would it be? His rationale for doing these things is to contact his son who died. I've heard that from several people, that he's absolutely fixated on coming up with a way to contact his dead son. That's why he's so interested in consciousness studies, and people like John Alexander, who, his
interest is in psychological warfare, right?
Well, he also is. He's got a
and non-lethal weapons.
A doctorate in thanatology, which is the study of death and non-death, near-death experiences. His thesis advisor was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Right. But then, but it is interesting, though, how you go back and you look at the fact that, a lot of people in the subject, have backgrounds in psychological warfare and in non-lethal weapons technology.
Yeah, that's true. Kit Green, he's another one that is a pretty interesting guy. I think he was in charge of psychotronic weapons development, or he had something to do with psychological weaponry for the CIA.
Right. And now he wants your brain scans. So everybody jump on board there and let's do that.
Yeah.
And that's the whole interesting thing. And for me about, the Skinwalker Ranch, when you look at all of this, and then the cast of characters that have been involved in Scientology and strained, the put-offs and people like that, and I say this a lot, but I think this is really interesting, got, their first batch of funding from Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, Mr. MK Ultra.
Right.
And things. I mean, what do you make of that? I know these are kind of heavier questions, but I think they're questions that are important.
No, they're important. There's others too. Andrea Puharich was, Gottlieb's boy, and the two of them did some pretty nefarious things too. Back in the 50s and 60s, before he really got going with Uri Geller. It always comes back to the same cast of characters, the behind the scenes string pullers. And Sidney Gottlieb someone's got to do a good book on him. I mean, he was just so weird. He was kind of the model for a cigarette man in X-Files, and he was the one that probably had Frank Olson killed, and may have been involved in some real nefarious activities in Southeast Asia during the war, and these horrible psychological warfare drugs and experiments, and it's just really. He figures prominently in Colm Kelleher's book Brain Trust, and this guy Daniel Guchek, who brought the diseased brains from the New Guinea 4A tribes people that had this, because they would eat the brains of their dead relatives when they died. They would develop called kuru, which is a type of prion misfolding like mad cow and Creutzfeldt-Jakobs, but he brought the brains back and identified the disease and got the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1978. Daniel Guchek is a very interesting character. And Colm did a great job researching his involvement and the fact that he brought these brains back for Dr. Gottlieb and his boys to tinker around with and say, well, maybe someone can make this into a weapon, so we have to come up with a way to have a defense against it. And the only way you can defend yourself against something is to weaponize it yourself to see how you can defend yourself. So,
Well, and why, I have to ask you, like, why would we ever think that when you've got people that have been, promoting this narrative for decade after decade, that they would actually be on the level now about UFOs and things? I mean, it's like they're obviously,
well, all those people are gone.
well, I mean, but put off. Kit Green, I mean, they're still riding on the, I mean, they were still involved in the early 70s with some
Yeah,
of
true.
that.
Yeah, they were the generation in between.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, some people are, like Jacques Vallée and his Forbidden Science book series. He's coming up with some pretty interesting things. He's kind of sticking his neck out a little bit in that regard, and much to his credit. But then he gets involved with Jesus. Well, I don't want to call anybody names, but
well, let's talk about his new book.
yeah,
Because
my
that did, when
God.
that first came out, that was, I think, for people that had really been working behind the scenes and had a pretty good knowledge of the subject. They were a little bit aghast for
I
that.
think that's putting it mildly.
Well, I mean,
Number one, I have nothing against New Agers and their attempt to, marginalize ufology. But Paola Harris is just, I really, I have a real problem with people that tend to believe everything that they're told and don't have, well fine-tuned bullshit meters. And that whole case to me is just
like
I
the
think it's
Ebens.
just
Like
it
we-
just doesn't wash.
Yeah, and that's been, I mean, some of the crazy things. And thanks, Mario, for posting how to donate to UFO Classified. I appreciate that, because all of that goes to not only keeping the show on the air, but us also archiving and doing some great things. So I appreciate your donations. Thank you. And I'll get new filing cabinets hopefully soon for Androffels files. But I mean, yeah, that was it was interesting. And why do you think he would, at the end of his career, perhaps go down that road?
It just I can't wait to ask him. He's I mean, I spent a good amount of time with him a couple of years ago. We were going over James Fox's film with James, and he's absolutely seemed like his very alert. I mean, he's getting up there. He's 80 years old now, but he seemed alert, and I didn't see any mental decline. But it's God, just to allow himself to be in a project with someone like Paula Harris it's just flat. I'm flabbergasted. And I haven't read the book, so I can't really comment on how he factors into the whole story. But I wouldn't have believed those guys for a minute based on the little that I know. I mean, some of the stuff in there is just like totally borrowed from Roswell, from some of the terms that they claim that they use are obvious. It just doesn't make sense. The whole thing doesn't make sense.
No, it is very strange. But I think when you look back at his career, he's always surrounded himself with the same group of people. And I will say that he, to me, has always been one of my icons. I've always held him in high regard. And so, I mean, to read Messengers of Deception and some of these books, all of his, Forbidden Science, getting little tidbits of information about, them, potential military abductions, about his interactions with Dodie and some of the characters, the cast of characters that we see time and time again coming up. It's very, very interesting. And so you do wonder at the end of the day, is this, are these people really moving independently, or is there a network of people who are trying to promote the same type of narrative? What are your thoughts? Because you spent
I
so much
really
time
don't
with all of
know.
them.
I Well, it's inexplicable to me. I would think that someone who professes to have the belief system that she does is what for his entire career he's been down on and actually battling the true believers. And he's a scientist. He's not somebody that accepts things at face value. He's got to poke it and prod it and look at it and turn it inside out and find out everything that he can before he's then makes a decision on one or another one, and passes judgment on it, if you will. But I, for some reason, Paula Harris, she's just. I mean, you gotta love her, but at the same time, what has she really done? I mean, she interviewed Philip Corso, and she's put on these new agey conferences for the last few years. Other than that, I mean, I don't know.
And let me ask you too, because I had a comment from somebody in chat that just said, perhaps did he fall down the Q train? And I think for me, and this is something that I've talked about on my podcasts for a long time, is the fact that the UFO community seems to be hand in hand with people that believe in dangerous conspiracy theories that are very kind of religious zealots in some regard, and also politically motivated. And, you look at QAnon and you look at some of the dangerous rhetoric that has been put forward because of that. And then you look at certain late night radio stations that have been promoting people who are supporting the QAnon train. And to me, that's very alarming. And I remember I went to, and again, I've talked about this on some of my shows before because it was such a disturbing and defining moment for me. I was at a conference and I was watching Jordan Sather talk, and it was one of his first talks. And he's this young, good-looking guy who was found by Corey Goode, and he was talking about health and wellness and new age ideas. And then, there's, 4 slides into it, he's got a black and white slide with a Nazi flag in color at the bottom. And then, at several slides after that, here's a big, beautiful photo and a quote from Hitler. And I'm thinking, what? I mean, it was
That's
really
kind of frightening.
Oh my God, it was really disturbing. But then when you go, I sat there with, I was with Craig Lang and another one of my friends at the time, and we just sat there, and I had to leave. I was physically ill because I just thought, here are all these people who are coming to learn about love and light and the New Age movement and UFOs, and here we are being confronted with this very dangerous rhetoric. And we don't notice that in the UFO community. And I think that's, I don't know what that's about. I think it's really dangerous. And what are your thoughts with regard to that? Because this is an important issue.
Well, the whole Corey Goode thing, I've done a little digging on that whole scenario, and what's his name, Roger Richards or whatever, his manager, and some of the accusations that have been thrown around with some pretty hard to ignore smoking gun evidence of real nefarious activities involving kids and drugs and other things. I've heard all that stuff, and I just stay away from it, as far away as I can. And there's a certain need, I think, that people have, and they tend to live in California too, for some reason. There's a certain need that they have to kind of come up with their own sort of ad hoc version of reality that makes them feel like they have some sort of goal or control or a path, and they stick together some of the wackiest things. And probably the best example of this is Contact in the Desert. They Some of the people that they have speaking there. I mean, Valet spoke there. I mean, there's been some pretty high profile people, Graham Hancock and others, but the majority of these people they're loony. They're just Looney Tunes as far as I'm concerned. And the fact that people that it fulfills some sort of need in them for validation, or it clicks off some boxes that they need to, combine different things together to come up with this reality view that makes them feel all warm and fuzzy. Life isn't like that. You can't just accept things at face value. You got to work. You got to research. You got to work, and you have to, develop a thick skin and a finely tuned BS meter. I mean, that's, people say, well, you're down on everything and everybody. And I say, no, I'm not. I just,
give me a break.
I'm down on the charlatans.
Well, and thank you, Matthew, for the nice thing. And I'm down on the charlatans too. And I think it's funny because this little trollish gnome sitting in his mama's basement or wherever just got on here, and his comment, Jesus Christmas, I used to listen to this woman, but she just bitches about neo-Nazis. We know Nazis were bad. Really brilliant comment. Just focus on the goddamn UFOs. Okay, 789. Yeah, okay. But I'm sorry that people. Trolls. Trolls are a special little spirit in this realm. But it is really funny when you start to peel back the layers or call people on their crap. You get hit from all sides, and I think that's unfortunate, because in life you need to have a dialogue where you're exchanging ideas, where you're looking at evidence, where you are trying to move forward. And I feel like because a lot of people in the UFO community aren't willing to do that, they're willing to just kind of have another person's back just because that person's making money on a book or doing A, B, C, and D, that things can really get to a rotten place. And people like this little troll fellow can get in there, and you know what I mean? That kind of behavior is okay.
That's the internet. I noticed right away that people kind of develop an alter ego online, and they
He's
do
probably
and say
5 foot tall and whatever. Wears heel
well,
lifts.
they do and say things that they wouldn't normally do. They feel emboldened with the anonymity to just speak outside of themselves, and are quick to judge and quick to jump on people and insult you. And I learned a long time ago that it's just as soon as you respond to them, then they win. So.
True, but sometimes responding makes you feel good, because then you can just put the spotlight back on them and just say, really, seriously, I don't know what, go get some new hair plugs, I don't know, get a membership at Squire Natural, for men, or whatever, go buy a corset that Shatner used to wear. I mean, try to, whatever. It was just like, God, people are special. So anyway, thank you for letting me go off on that little tangent.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Believe me.
Thanks, Steve.
I've been vilified and called names, and people call me a spook, and don't listen to him, he's CIA. And it's like, yeah, right.
Well, I'm in the evil cabal, the dark cabal. I'm something, But I mean, definitely now that I'm. And it's funny for me. It's like I'm doing and calling people out. And if I were a man, nobody would ever, it wouldn't really necessarily be questioned as much. But since I'm a woman, I'm a slut or a whore or things like that, which has been very fascinating. It is very interesting to be a woman in a field full of white 70-year-old men.
Yeah. I don't envy you, and I've been trying to have your back as much as
Thank
possible.
you.
Yeah,
You, God
I
bless
don't.
you.
Well, I don't like the backstabbing and the inflamed egos that are in this field, and just I don't know. There's so much fluff, and I mean people are falling for the messengers of deception, as Valet put it. I think that there's a lot of societal manipulation, and there's a lot of societal programming that's going on,
Right.
and I think now that the whole UAP subject is now being addressed by the new generation of politicians and military people. I think that we are going to see some progress, but come on, these guys have gun camera footage from the 40s and 50s that totally trashed that stupid Tic Tac video and the gimbal video. I mean, which are like 70s bad IR. They got much better stuff. Gordon Cooper, talks about the landing at Edwards, and the aliens getting out. Okay, well, where's that footage? You know,
That could be interesting.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they must have. Thousands of examples of gun camera footage and other footage, military derived footage, and scientific data as well. Magnetic data, gravitational data, luminance, you know, spectrum, analyzing different light spectra, and that all that stuff's got to be somewhere.
And so, what do you make of this latest thing? With the Elizondo TTSA. Is that purely? Are they doing that from the place where they're trying to better humanity, or is there?
No. They're just trying to get ahead of the conversation because they want to establish control, which is their job. Governments protect us and they control us. That's their job. That's what government's all about. And if they can get ahead of the subject and start steering the narrative, then they're going to make up for 70 years of lost time, or they hope to. And I think one of the motivating factors is stuff's going to come out, and it may not come out from our government. It may be the Chinese. It may be, the French. It could be the Indians when they get to the moon, and when you start having multiple countries up in space and private corporations in space, you're going to have a much higher chance for certain things to happen, be documented, and then revealed to the public. So I think that they're trying to get in front of the conversation. They're putting their toe in the water, and in the meantime, the whole idea of my labs and just straight abduction scenarios are not going to be addressed. And they're, like we started out the conversation, it looks like it appears that somebody is trying to marginalize and call into question some of the bedrock cases that we have. And knowing Travis for over 20 years, I've caught him, like I said before, in that 1,000-yard stare where he freezes, his eyes get wide, and he just looks right through you, and that's not normal. The guy is still traumatized at a very deep level, and you can't hide that.
But could it be he's traumatized because he was promoting something that got out of hand?
No.
Well, I would be interested for you to, when you get a lot of extra time, to go back and listen to a couple of my shows, the last show specifically.
Yeah. I know the area really well there, and I know that tower is nowhere near close enough to be involved in the actual event itself. I just, it's too far away.
Yeah,
And that's, those guys weren't idiots. I mean, I've camped and fished and hiked all around there, Turkey Creek. And I used to live, less than 2 hours away, about an hour and 20 minutes away from there, hour and a half. And it's just none of what I've heard, none of the scenario that I've heard makes any sense to me.
Well, I would I would like you to listen to or watch the show and look at the presentation that Ryan put forward, because I think there's a lot of stuff coming out from people who know Travis personally, and I get that. But I would be interested for you, because you are a great investigator, for you to see that, and then we'll have a private conversation about that.
Okay. Yeah, I can't really comment fully on that.
Right.
All I can do is base it on my relationship with Travis, and having met Mike and a couple of the other guys. It doesn't make sense. The one lie detector test that he did fail, he was set up, and he passed all the others with flying colors. So did the other guys.
Watch it and let's reconvene, because I think there's some. It's just fascinating. But I wanted to ask you, because Scott is going to really hurt me if I don't ask you, because he's at a wedding and he couldn't be here and he wanted to interview you, but he wanted to go back to get what was the earliest case of a cattle mutilation on record.
Well, of a cattle mutilation,
or a mutilation,
I'm not sure, but livestock mutilation, the earliest one that I've been able to dig up was from the very beginning of the reign of James I in England, in the fall of 1605 and the winter of 1607 or 1606 rather. Hundreds and hundreds of sheep were being mutilated around London, and there's a actual there's a statement in the court records of James I that says, of this sundry conjectures, hundreds of sheep have been found mysteriously slain with only some inward parts taken away, the meat and the wool left behind. Of the sundry conjectures, but most would agreeth that this tendeth toward fireworks. So it says that, in one case it was 100, and in many others there was less. But it sounds like a big wave of sheep mutilations in 1605, 1606, right after he announced that he was going to rewrite the Christian, or do an English translation of the Bible. It just helped fund Shakespeare to write Macbeth, and Guy Fawkes was getting ready to blow up the House of Lords and the gunpowder plot. And so pretty interesting time in history.
I would say so. And thank you for wrapping that up. And so where can people find you?
Well, I'm just, all you have to do is Google my name. I've got quite a bit of number of hits there. You can go to Our Strange Planet. That's my website. It's been kind of, I've been having some problems with it, but there's a ton of articles and other things on there, and maps. And there's a map of all the wonderful areas of interest in the San Luis Valley, where I investigated for a good solid 12 years. And I have a map on Google Maps, places to go in the San Luis Valley. And you click on each one of the little thumbtacks there, and a drop down description and a photograph comes. And I think there's about 70 places that are noted. It's probably up around 100,000 hits by now. And then my book, Stalking the Herd, is
such a great
really
book.
It's the only comprehensive book that looks at the totality of the cattle mutilation phenomenon from an objective place, not from a foregone conclusion. I just go into it totally neutral, and let the facts speak for themselves. It's a 600-page book, but should have been 900. I took 300 pages out. It is the only case history of the cattle mutilation phenomenon. I used databases from 12 different researchers to compile a timeline listing. And it also looks at our relationship with cattle. It goes back at least 10,000 years, 10,500 years, how it took 1,000 years to domesticate the first domesticated cows. And I found out a very interesting fact that all the beef cattle on this planet have genetic links all the way back to a small herd of 80 animals, which I find is quite fascinating. And the other thing I find fascinating is the only cultures where we have cattle worship, in East Africa, the Maasai and the Dinka and others, and in India, we don't have a single case of cattle mutilation to my knowledge. And the sacred white Brahma cattle of India are all over the world. India is the largest exporter of cattle because they don't eat them. And if you look at all the millions of Brahmas around the world, there's not one case of a Brahma being mutilated. And mutilations only occur predominantly, for the most part, 99.9% happen in Christian countries.
Interesting.
So,
Interesting.
and I
Thank
look
you.
at all the theories and all that, I get into the, theorizing and some of the weirder cases, and I just let the reader decide. I'm finishing up a project to follow that book up with David Perkins. And
I like David Perkins a lot.
Yeah.
Great researcher.
So, and then, of course, my Mysterious Valley books, as you mentioned, there's 3 of them. And then Stalking the Herd is my latest book. And the book before that was Stalking the Tricksters, which is my attempt to try to come up with a mechanism that may tie together all types of paranormal phenomena. And that's the trickster archetype.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And I want to, there is a couple questions just really quickly. One from Northern, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to be good and ending the show. I'm trying to end the show at this, at this specific time. This is kind of takes an act of God here. But can you just tell me if you captured anything with your new skywatching setup?
Yeah, we've caught several things. But until we get corroborating data that we can compare it to, we're not going to really publicize it. More and more of these systems are being set up. I think we've got 10 or 11, almost a dozen now, I think, that are out there. And we've heard the initial response has been very good out there. And my San Luis Valley project, of course, with COVID, it just put the brakes on the whole thing. I'm completely funded to put in another camera, and the multi-sensor data package, the magnetometers, accelerometers, radio frequency spectrum analyzers, and EMF meters and stuff. So as soon as we get a good place to put it up, they're trying to gouge me at the ISP. We were going to put it up on their tower, and they said, okay, $3,000 a month.
Wow.
I said, I don't think so. 34,000 a year. No, pal. So I'm just going to show up at his office and shame him into, coming up with a more reasonable figure.
Good. Well, look, keep us posted. And I want to have you back, when Scott is available, because he was so excited to talk to you tonight. And you have so much information. And thank you for letting me go different places, because I think you've
no problem.
done, it's been a fascinating interview as always. I love having you here, and it's fun to do the video format now. I wish I could see your face, Chris, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I got to get my internet thing. I'm 2 miles away from the fiber line. It's come 5 miles up the hill, and they have 2 more miles to go. I'm wired to my house, but they haven't. This particular 3-house, kind of line has not been connected to the main line yet. So
well, soon.
I'm just using my cell phone hotspot.
Thank
pay
you. I appreciate
enthusiasts.
it. No, I appreciate
Yeah.
it very, very much. Thank you for being here. And I want to thank everybody for getting into chat, asking great questions again. I mean, we are forming a community from all over the world. And I want to say I got a call from a fellow over in the UK who was listening to the series that we just did on UFO Classified and was very appreciative of the work that we are doing because, as we know, sometimes talking about things that go against the grain in the UFO community is not necessarily something that is easy, and you do find yourself the target of special people or groups or whatever, but we are here. We're doing the best we can. We appreciate your support. I appreciate your support. You can go to ufoclassified.com to become a Patreon, or you can subscribe here. But make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you get this out to your friends. Tweet it. Do all the stuff that I should be doing, but I'm so overwhelmed with social media. I'm just excited I can actually take the mute button and unmute it. It's a miracle. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. I hope you guys have a wonderful and safe weekend, and we will catch you next week with a wonderful show.